الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. I was talking about the name Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the Ism A'zam and the greatest of all the names, and all the rest of the names are, they fall under the banner of Allah. That's the greatest name. Every other name is under this. And I gave you the example of how some names are greater and some are further great and some are further great and some are the greatest. Like I mentioned, the example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ash-Shafi, the one who gives a cure. If that's not the greatest name, that's a great name, but not the greatest name. It falls under another bigger, greater name, which is Ar-Raziq, the sustainer. And that's also not the greatest name, it's a great name. Ar-Raziq falls under another name of Allah, which is Al-Khaliq, which is the creator. And that's also not the greatest name, it's a great name, but not the greatest, because it falls under another name, which is Al-Qadir, all-powerful. Al-Qadir is a great name, a greater name, and it holds Al-Khaliq, the creator, under its banner, and Ar-Raziq, the sustainer, under its banner, and Ash-Shafi, the cure provider, curer, under its banner. Al-Qadir is obviously a great name, and that also is under the name of Allah, because the word Allah includes all the names. So this is the sequence. This is just an example of learning. Some names are great, some are greater, some are greater, and some are further great, and some are the greatest. Allah is the greatest. In various hadiths we learn Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to be the greatest ayat of Quran in the hadith. Akrama ayatin fi kitabillah. Bismillah is mentioned as Akrama ayatin fi kitabillah, means the most honorable ayat in the book of Allah. And this is narrated in Tafseer, volume 1, page 6. Tafseer volume 1, page 6. And another hadith talks about Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim as A'zam ayatin. Fi kitabillah. Is the greatest. A'zam means the greatest. Bismillah Akram means most honorable. So it's considered to be the greatest ayat in the hadith, most honorable ayat in the hadith. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the greatest ayat of Quran. There is no ayat greater than that. And the most honorable ayat of Quran. Well, now this question comes in the mind, that why Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the greatest ayat. That if it's about, because it carries the greatest name of Allah, Ism A'zam, the greatest name of Allah, which is Allah. Is that the reason why Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the greatest? if that was the reason, then Bismillah, Allah's name, Allah is mentioned in so many verses of Quran. There is only Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim that talks about the name of Allah. No. There's so many verses of Quran which talk about the name of Allah. Then why those verses are not considered to be the greatest, and only Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is considered to be the greatest ayat and verse of Quran? Well, here is the reason. My teacher says, in order to explain that the name Allah, you can see the example. Look at the example my teacher gave. Right in Surah Al-Fatiha, you find the name Allah mentioned in the ayat number 2. Ayat number 2 is what? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ayat number 2 of Surah Al-Fatiha. There is also the name of Allah in here. And then, so there are 3 names of Allah mentioned in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One is Allah, the second is Ar-Rahman, and the third is Ar-Rahim. So ayat number 2 of Surah Al-Fatiha has Allah in it. Right? Ayat number 3, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That's ayat number 3. Ayat number 3 also has Rahman and Rahim. So verse number 2 and verse number 3 has all those 3 names which are mentioned in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim as well. Then why don't you call the second verse or the third verse to be the greatest ayat of Quran? Why are we calling Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to be the greatest ayat of Quran? So my teacher said this is very important and academic and scholarly point to remember. The point is that sometimes the word Allah or other names of Allah, like in this case Rahman and Rahim, are mentioned in certain parameters or certain framework which is stated, which is mentioned to prove something, and this is mentioned as part of the chain of evidence. Part of the chain of evidence, the name of Allah is mentioned to prove something. So in these kind of scenarios where the name of Allah is mentioned in the middle of the chain of evidence to prove something, these names of Allah, despite the fact it means it stands for all the attributes of Allah. The word Allah, remember I described the definition, Ismun Jami'un Mustajmi'un li Jami' as-Sifat al-Kamaliyya, a name that combines all the perfect attributes in it. So despite the fact the name Allah stands and indicates towards all the perfect attributes which are there in Allah, and despite the fact the name Ar-Rahman indicates towards the Rahmatun Amma, general mercy of Allah that includes a mu'min and a kafir both, and despite the fact the name Ar-Rahim indicates towards Rahmatun Khassa, specific mercy of Allah that relates to the mu'min people only, despite this fact, all this is true, but when the name of Allah or other names are mentioned in the middle of a chain of evidence to prove something, my teacher said this framework is restricting. It restricts the meaning of the names of Allah, and it's restricted to what is trying to serve, to prove what is trying to be proven in that verse. For example, in these 2 verses, verse number 2, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, verse number 3 of Surah Al-Fatiha, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, in these 2 verses, what is said is, what is being proven, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, what is proven in this verse is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Mahmud. What is being proven is Allah being Mahmud, the praised one. He is the only one who deserves to be praised. This is the goal which is pursued, and this is the goal which is being proved through this verse of Quran. This verse is proving what? It is proving Allah to be Mahmud, Allah to be the praised one, the only one who deserves to be praised. This is what the verse is trying to prove.
So now the word Allah is going to be restricted in its application because it's mentioned in the middle of a chain of evidence that is mentioned to prove a goal, and now this framework restricts the application of the name Allah towards that goal only. Despite the fact in its meaning it stands for all the attributes of perfection,
which are included in the word Allah, but because it falls in the middle of a chain of evidence to prove something, this framework restricts the application of the name to prove that thing only. So in this example, we are trying to prove that Allah deserves to be praised. He's the only one who deserves to be praised, right? Not he's supposed to be afraid of, although we are afraid of Allah as well. Another verse of Holy Quran, for example, and that is the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 40. Al-Baqarah, verse number 40, where Allah says, وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ. That means, and and me only you people should be afraid of. Me only you should be afraid of. So this ayat from Surah Al-Baqarah verse 40 is commanding us to be afraid of Allah. We need to be afraid of Allah. But is that the point we are trying to prove in this verse? Alhamdulillah. No. Again, this Allah includes all the attributes of Allah. But are we trying to prove that Allah is supposed to be afraid of in this verse of Quran? No. This Allah does not stand, that is not proving that we are supposed to be afraid of. This Allah in this context and being laid in a chain of evidence to prove this goal, this is the goal that is trying to prove that Allah is the only one who deserves to be praised. This framework is restricting the application and meaning of Allah towards this purpose only. So this is not proven by Alhamdulillah. This ayat does not prove that. Although Allah includes all the attributes of Allah in it, right? But this attribute is not the one that is represented by the word Allah. This word Allah is part of a chain that is proving this goal, not this. This is a very clear example that despite the fact the word Allah includes all the attributes, sometimes a name of Allah is mentioned, whether Allah or other name, is mentioned in a context that is restricting its application because it's part of a chain of evidence to prove some specific thing, some makhsus and specific goal. So this is a very good example to keep this in mind. Whereas, coming back to the point I was mentioning, why we believe Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the a'azam ayatin fi kitabillah, the greatest ayat in the book of Allah, when the same name of Allah is mentioned in so many other verses of Quran as well. Why do we call Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to be the greatest? Because in so many other verses of Allah, Allah is mentioned as an evidence to prove some goal, and that being part of a chain of evidence restricts the application of the name of Allah towards proving that specific goal only. This is why that framework restricts, whereas in the word Allah in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is used unrestricted. This is the reason why Bismillah is considered to be the greatest ayat of Quran. Is that clear? It's mentioned unrestricted. Now let's go to the root of the word Allah. Shall I erase this? The word Allah, let's
go to the root. The root of the word is actually al, which is like in English we say the, and ilah. And you can also write it ilah with this alif can be written as a short alif, which is equal to the big alif. So you want to write it as a big alif, you write it like this after the lam. You want to make it short, then you connect the ha with the lam and then put the alif as a shortened alif like this. Both ways are okay grammatically. It's not a problem to write. You can write in both the ways. So that's the root of the word Allah. So we added the definite article, al, in Arabic we call al. We added on the top of the name, this is a noun. On top of this noun, ilah. Ilah in Arabic means a ma'bud. Or a second meaning is mutahayyarun fi. These are two meanings. Mutahayyarun fi. Ma'bud means the worship. It's worthy of worship. Someone who's worthy of worship is called ma'bud. Someone who deserves to be worshipped. Mutahayyarun fi means it's difficult to translate, but about whom we wonder. Or we are surprised. About whom we are surprised. About whom we wonder. Someone about whom we wonder. Someone about whom we are surprised. This is called mutahayyirun fi. These are the two meanings of the name of the word of the noun ilah in Arabic. So now you add al, the definite article on top of it. What would it become? It would then become al ilah. Like this. Right? You add al on top of the noun ilah, it will become al-ilah. Al-ilah, right? So now this hamza is dropped. This all drops and lots of things in Arabic. So this hamza gets dropped, and what we are left with is al and lah. So that's how we combine this al, this lam with this lam, and we write it like this. Allah. The same alif can also be written on top of the shad. We write it here as well. You write here as well. But usually when you put the shad, you write the i'rab or the sign of the alif on top of it. Usually, not after it. After writing shad, now you won't write alif here, you will write it here. Or even the i'rab. If any i'rab that goes over a letter which has a shad mark on it, the i'rab is written over the shad or under the shad. That's the way it usually is. So that's how it became Allah. So this is the derivation process of the word al-ilah. Allah went through this process. And these are the two meanings of the word ilah. So Allah means the only one who is worthy of worshipping, and the only one about whom we wonder and we are surprised. Now when it comes to surprise and wonder about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not like surprise can be of two types. Somebody is wandering in the desert, he's in a state of, he's wandering and he's lost. He doesn't know where to find water. For example, a person trying to find water in the middle of the desert, he goes in different directions to search for water. He's also wandering, you know. But this wandering is for a lost person. Now, if you look at the hadith, let me tell you. So, keep this muqaddimah and prelude in mind. Now let me tell you one thing, that all the attributes of Allah are above and beyond any kind of naqs, or whereas the attributes of us human beings are full of naqs. All attributes of Allah are beyond naqs, shortcoming. Allah has no shortcoming. Whereas all the attributes of us, the human beings, all of them, every attribute of ours has a shortcoming attached to it. Examples. When we say that Allah is alim, knowledgeable, and when we use the word alim for us human beings, someone is an alim, is a knowledgeable person. Look at the difference. The same word alim used for Allah, when it's used as an attribute for Allah, and the same word alim used as an attribute for humans. Every attribute of humans has naqs and shortcomings attached to it. Every attribute of Allah has no shortcoming with it. Okay, now let's go to this example. Okay, how is the shortcoming? Okay, now Allah says in the Holy Quran, أخرجكم من بطون أمهاتكم أخرجكم من بطون أمهاتكم. Allah took you out from the, in other words, from the bellies of your mothers. لا تعلمون شيئا. When you did not know anything, لا تعلمون. So we were blank slate ignorance when we were born from the wombs of the mothers. This is one verse of Holy Quran. This is Surah Al-Nahl, verse 78. Nahl 78. Another verse of Holy Quran says, لكي لا يعلم من بعد علم شيئا. لكي لا يعلم من بعد علم شيئا. This is the verse of Quran from Surah Hajj, verse 5. Okay? So now look at the situation of us human beings. When Allah brought us out from the wombs of our mothers, we were blank slate ignorance. After we learned the knowledge, لكي لا يعلم من بعد علم شيئا. So he doesn't know after knowledge anything. So this is what our scholars say. Our knowledge is always along with the shortcomings. What are the shortcomings? Two shortcomings. One shortcoming is related to the state before learning the knowledge. Before learning the knowledge, we were ignorant. Shortcoming number one. Our knowledge was was preceded with the ignorance. Ignorance is first and knowledge proceeds after it. Knowledge comes after it. And after knowing, we end up knowing nothing. That means from this verse we learn that after knowledge we end up forgetting. After the knowledge we have forgetting, which is in Arabic we say nisyan. So one problem that we humans face with our attribute of knowledge, that before learning the knowledge we are ignorant. After the learning the knowledge we forget what we learned and we end up forgetting it. So we face the problem of nisyan, means forgetfulness. We learned the thing, but still after learning we forgot it. So our knowledge is coupled with these two problems. First the ignorance, and at the end forgetting it. Whereas Allah's knowledge is never preceded with ignorance. He was always knowledgeable. Alimun is la ma'loom, right? He was knowledgeable when there was nothing to be known. He didn't create anything yet. He knew everything before creating everything, right? That's the absoluteness of the knowledge of Allah. Before anything knowable was even existing, before He even created anything that could be known, He still knew. That's the absoluteness of Allah's knowledge. He was never ignorant. And after the knowledge, Allah never forgets. So His attribute is never coupled with any shortcoming, where our attribute is coupled with two clear shortcomings that we learn right from the Holy Quran, apart from several others that we also have, but these are just two examples that we learn from the Quran. Example number two is about the rahmat and mercy. When we human beings, show mercy towards somebody, then we have rahmat and mercy, versus when we say Allah is Rahman and Rahim, Allah is all merciful and compassionate. His mercy, again, His attributes are beyond any shortcoming. The same attribute when it comes to us human beings is always with the shortcomings. Example number two about mercy. He called Allah to be Rahman and Rahim. There is no shortcoming in His mercy. When we become merciful, what is the shortcoming? Infi'al. That's the shortcoming that we have along with the mercy. Infi'al means getting affected. That's the problem. This is a problem that we human beings face. That when we see things around us, we get affected, and because we got affected, we end up, because of the infi'al, we end up showing some mercy. Whether we show the real amount of mercy that the person deserves to receive or not, that's another problem. And sometimes we may show less mercy, less than what the person deserves to receive. Sometimes we may even show more mercy, more than what the person deserves to receive. We cannot, gauge the real amount of mercy that the person deserves to receive from us. That's another problem that we human beings have. But before going to that problem, right from the beginning of showing the mercy, the reason why human beings are like us, sinners like us, who are not awliyaullah, not the beloved servants of Allah like Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, sinners like me, when we show the mercy, we show it out of infi'al, because we get affected. When we see a person who is suffering, we get affected. Sometimes we end up crying, seeing those scenarios. So we show some mercy, because of the infi'al. Whereas when Allah shows the mercy, there is no infi'al, no ta'assur, not getting affected. Allah is not getting affected from those situations. We are not supposed to show mercy because we get affected. We are supposed to show mercy because we pay respect to the person. There's a difference between infi'al and ihtiram. We should give the mercy, my teacher said, give the mercy to the person because he deserves that respect. And the justice of Islam calls for that mercy. Whereas we show the mercy because we get affected.
So if we didn't get affected, we are not going to show it. Even though Allah wants us to show the mercy, we will not, because at this moment I couldn't get affected.
So it's because of how much you got affected would define how much mercy you would show. And if you didn't get affected, you're not going to show the mercy, even though you were supposed to, but you will not, because you didn't get affected. So because the reason behind the mercy is how much you get affected. And that's wrong. We are supposed to show mercy because of paying respect to the person and because of what the justice dictates us to show that much amount of mercy. But that's not the reason why we show the mercy. We show the mercy because we get affected. And this is the reason if we didn't get affected, we don't show mercy on even the person who deserves to receive it. And that's a problem.
So, and some of the times you find some people even show mercy to those whom Allah should be showing His wrath. When Allah is applying His punishment on someone, because Allah is showing His ghadab and wrath, people get infial. Some people get affected and they start showing the mercy on the punished person. No, that's too inhumane, that shouldn't be like this punishment is not right.
Right? Because your entire mercy concept is sinner of sinners depends on infial and how much you got affected. Sometimes even you get affected from the punished person upon whom Allah is applying His ghadab based on His justice, but you're not understanding the justice of Allah. Because even those people for whom you showed mercy, you didn't show it out of the concept of justice. You showed it out of the concept of getting affected. And that's a problem.
When it comes to zina, for example, Allah has said that الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما 100 جلدة. So ولا تأخذكم بهما رأفة في دين الله. So Allah is teaching, we learn from this verse of Quran that a zaniya woman and a zani man should be slashed with 100 slashes. So we are not supposed to have ra'fat and compassion towards them.
But people end up having compassion towards them, right? Why? Because they didn't show mercy based on justice of Allah. They didn't even understand the concept of justice of Allah. It's justice being served. So now you end up showing mercy towards the criminals because your mercy was based on infial, getting affected by scenarios, not based on the concept of justice of God, to understand His justice and to show the due respect that the person deserves. No. So this is the difference, this is a shortcoming. Example number 2, our attributes are always with shortcomings. Even the good things that we do have shortcomings in it. So whereas when it comes to awliya Allah, the beloved servants of Allah, look at the example. Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam gave away their bread to the miskin, the destitute, yatim, the orphan, and asir, the captive guy who was recently freed. And they said, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. The only reason why we feed you is for the wajh, for the space of Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We don't need from you a reward or thankfulness. You don't need nothing from the people. They are doing it not for the sake of infial and getting affected from the people. They are doing it for the sake of Allah, for rida and pleasure of Allah, for the sake of wajh of Allah, not for the sake of getting affected. This is the understanding the concept of justice and focusing only on Allah and doing only for His sake, regardless of the whether somebody thanks you or doesn't thank you or forget thanking you, or whether somebody gives you some worldly reward or doesn't give you worldly reward. Those are meaningless for Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Their attribute of helping out is without a shortcoming and naqs, because they understand the concept of the wisdom of Allah and the justice of Allah, and they pay the due respect and they do everything for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of people or getting affected from the situations. This is about the second example of, can you erase this?
It's 8:30 we can end. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.